I'm Carole Taylor. On this edition of Journal, we examine two public policy initiatives that are turning the governing of our province upside down. Mayor Mike Hurley is directly affected in his two roles, first as chair of the Metro Vancouver Board and second as mayor of Burnaby. So first, an independent report looking at the governance of Metro Vancouver. It was needed as a result of the tremendous overrun on the wastewater treatment plant, a budget that went from $700 million to $3.6 billion. How could that happen? Well, the Deloitte report just released paints a grim picture. The board is too big. 41 directors representing 21 municipalities, Tsawwassen First Nations, and Electoral Area A. Too many people around the table. The politically elected chair should be replaced by a non-elected professional governance expert. Expenses for the directors should be reevaluated and trimmed. Basically, the report says this regional government has outgrown its governance structure and must be changed. Over to you, Chairman Hurley. And as if problems at Metro Van weren't enough of a distraction, the province recently pushed through legislation that in effect overrides the municipal jurisdiction of zoning and permitting. Bill 15, all in the name of fast-tracking favored projects. And who gets to decide these lucky winners? The Premier and Cabinet. Not the legislature, not First Nations, not municipalities, certainly not you or me. The government is saying, trust me. Already at least one lawsuit is being threatened. So for Mayor Hurley, the challenges and changes are coming at him from all directions. The mayor joins me after this break. Welcome, Mike Hurley, sort of mayor, chair of everything these days. It's all coming at you. I can't imagine what your life is like. Let's start by looking at the situation with Metro Van, because a report has just come out. What did you think about the report?
There was nothing in there that surprised me, I don't think. I think, we are at a point where some change is needed, and I knew that when I took the job. And so I'm very open-minded to making the changes, but in a smart and educated kind of way, and not. I have to make sure as chair that I don't live on emotion like others do, and make good decisions that will serve that organization that's so important to the region in the best possible way as we're moving forward. So it's a challenge for sure, but I think we can get to a good place if we all keep our heads and work together to do what we need to do.
It's very hard to do when you've got so many people around the table from, 21 different municipalities and Tsawwassen First Nations, Electoral Area A, all of that. They all have their own agendas, and to get people to think of, okay, what's the bigger plan and how do we go forward? So let's look at the numbers, first of all, because the report said board's too big.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just too big, 41 people sitting around a table. How do you get at that?
Well, we'll have to work with the province to do that, of course. It's their legislation to make any changes to how the board is put together. Perhaps there's different ways of, right now for every 50,000 people in your city, you got a seat at the table. So perhaps there's a way to look at that. But I do think it's important to have regional representation so that everyone is heard. So it'll be a needle to thread. But I do think that we can come up with ways, if the province agrees, to make the board smaller and to make sure, even more important, that it doesn't grow bigger and bigger. Because as cities grow, that board will grow too under the current legislation. So we have to look at all of that.
I was, when I was there, it was called GVRD, but it was the same idea of regional government. And even then, it was very, very hard to manage. And I think of the times that you've been chair of committees, I've been chair, I think 12 is kind of a good number that people really get to contribute and you listen to each other. Would an inner cabinet, outer cabinet ever work as a model?
I think all of those have to be looked at, and that'll be part of the process. But again, we'll have to work with the province because they're the ones that actually make those decisions at the end of the day. But I don't know if we can get to 12. That would be a tough. As a chair, of course, you would always like a smaller number. It's easier to manage. But you know, if you look at it, even with 41 people around the table, 95% of the time, the votes are mainly unanimous for what we do. So it's not like it's a board tearing itself down, although I do think it's starting to feel the weight of the downloading on every municipality from the other orders of government. So I think municipalities and mayors especially are feeling the pressure of how they're going to meet all the challenges, and sometimes that comes out at the Metro Van table. You know, so I think a lot of municipalities are feeling a great deal of pressure, feeling like we're backstopping, you know, immigration policies, and we're backstopping housing policies that we have nothing to do with. So a lot of mayors are feeling the pressure of that, I think, and that's seen at the table.
So one of the recommendations was that you are an elected member who is the chair.
Right.
And they suggest that you move away from having anyone who's elected there and just get a governance expert to chair. What do you think of that?
I think that would be a very difficult one because the politics still have to be managed, and I'm not sure if, and I'm well open to the idea, but I'm not too sure how that, you've been in politics, how that would all work of trying to manage that, because there are going to be politicians around that table. And you're going to have to be, if you're a governance expert, you're going to have to be very skilled at managing all those bodies around the table as well. I think, though, that the consultant clarified that a bit and said, you know, that type of chair would be for the major projects, you know, the GBS and DD, the sewer systems and the water systems, that perhaps that could be managed that way, where the big money really is in Metro Vancouver. Like all the governance side of it, like it's minuscule part of the money that Metro Vancouver spends.
So one of the reasons that this report was asked for in the first place was what happened with the wastewater treatment plant. Did anything come out in the report that either surprised you or you thought, oh, this will help us do that sort of big project better in the future?
I don't believe that this governance committee was put together because of the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, that's how some people spin it. I think governance needed to be looked at. It's been a long time since it's been truly looked at in Metro Vancouver. I committed to that, and it was me who brought it forward, being the new chair. Because I think governance in all organizations, especially larger organizations, and remember Metro Vancouver is a $3 billion a year enterprise. Every 3 to 5 years, I think we should be having a review of our governance to make sure we're keeping up with the times. And I think it's been so long since it's been done, and I think that needs to be part of the structure we put in place to look at the governance every 3 to 5 years. So you know, I think it will take us to a good place. Will it help with how those projects are managed? I'm not so sure about that because you rely on your experts, you rely on your staff to guide you on those. I mean, no politician, you know, has the expertise to come up with those projects. They truly rely on the people, the engineers and all the other experts to guide you through that. I do believe, though, we have put in place an expert panel at Metro Vancouver from the outside who will advise us. So that's already in place. We've started a major projects team in Metro Vancouver now that really bring great expertise to the table. So I think those two things will be far more effective and manage large projects as we move forward than simply a governance review, which I don't think I think it will help, but it's not a silver bullet to those large projects, what everyone is looking for. The large projects, I think, remember the budget was set for North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant 2013. So it took us 5 years to achieve the funding from the provincial and federal governments. $220 million each. And then it took another 2 years to put a contractor. That's the real issue, is that whole procurement process and how long it takes to get from planning to start. And so that's, to me, that's something that really needs to be looked at, how we go about that whole procurement process. And I think all governments, their hands are tied a lot when it comes to doing really good procurement processes.
And then, as you say, when it finally gets to a place, 3.6 billion or whatever, and it has to be distributed somehow around the region, the municipalities who are not directly involved are going, what? I'm not going to raise taxes on my guys.
Yeah. But that's a process that was put in place 28 years ago, how those things are paid for. And there is a big history to that. And people remember the history of when the Fraser sewage treatment plant needed a lot more money, and some cities didn't want to pay for it, and now that's kind of flipped. And so the members that were in the Fraser sewage district remember that. So now they're saying, oh yeah, but this is what you said back then. So history comes back to hurt you sometimes.
Yes, and for sure there'll be more and more of these major projects as our population grows. We're going to take a short break, Mayor, and then when we come back, I'd like to refer to something that you brought up, which is mayors and municipalities are really feeling burdened at this point, and often burdened without power. So we'll talk about that when we get back in just a moment. Back with Mayor Hurley. I try to stay calm. Sometimes I do. But I have to tell you, I am so angry about Bill 15. I cannot believe this grabbing of power into the Premier's office, Premier and Cabinet, overriding First Nations, municipalities, environmentalists, neighborhoods, whatever. I couldn't believe he went ahead with it.
Well, I mean, this is just a follow-up to all the housing legislation we saw that came in and took away powers. I really don't understand what the need is here, and it's totally the wrong way to go. We should all be collaborating and working together. If there is an issue with building large projects, and that's truly what's holding up these large projects, or these projects, whatever's deemed to be in the provincial need, then let's figure out a way to do it, but do it through talking to each other. There's been no collaboration with municipalities on this bill at all. You've seen 120 municipalities come out and speak against it. The UBCM has spoken against it. But it's just the wrong way to, in an era where democracy has been challenged all over the world, I think. This is a bad message, and it may have good intentions. And perhaps you could think, well, maybe this government can do it in a fair manner. I'm not so sure about that, but this legislation will be there for a long time. And a lot of people will have that power, and we just saw what's happening down south. So anything's possible. So I just think that this is totally the wrong message. I don't understand it. Because municipalities have certainly never, to my knowledge, held up the building of a school or the building of anything of that nature. So I just think that this is, another overreach that we're seeing. And I just don't think it sends a good message to the public at all.
So with all of these municipalities speaking up and trying to slow it down or have a second look, it didn't make any difference.
No, it didn't make any difference at all. And again, we saw that in the housing legislation as well. So, that's, I guess the Premier sees this as the way to govern. And, I don't think it's the right way to go.
And I think it's a little bit precious to talk about, oh, don't you want a hospital built or don't you want a school built? Because really what this legislation is about is fast-tracking some of these, whether they're green energy ideas or pipelines or whatever they are, electrical grids. It's quite a different issue from building a school.
Absolutely. And as I said, when they're building Burnaby Hospital, we go out of our way to accommodate anything that's needed for that hospital, above and beyond, to make sure everything's fast-tracked, because no one wants a new hospital more than we do. So, I agree with you. This is not about hospitals or schools it's not the reason the Massey Tunnel is taking as long as it's taken to get done. So I just, sometimes I wonder if this is a distraction from the things that are not happening. The mess that healthcare's in, the mess that our school systems are in now that school board budgets are cut to the bone, or they're having to cut music programs and things like that. Because school boards, and I talk to our school board a lot because schools mean a lot to us. The portables that are being used so much now, and you may know this as the former finance minister, but I don't think many people know this, that that's not considered capital. So those modulars that are put up around all schools now, and if we look at Brentwood Park, there's 20 modulars at that school, an elementary school. That all comes out of the operational budget of school boards. So because of that, and they're spending millions on these, they're having to cut back on music programs, for example, in schools. And that's not fair, because they're not seen as permanent structures, but in reality they'll be there for probably 20 years. So it's really affecting a lot of people. So I often wonder, are we distracting ourselves away from the real issues, and the real issues that face people every day, and that's schools, hospitals, infrastructure. I don't think this bill will do a whole lot other than take away more democracy.
Well, when you mention democracy, you've got examples. We've got examples. We don't have to go south of the border, but when Prime Minister Trudeau was there, when he brought in Emergency Measures Act, just freezing everything because of the nuisance of the convoys, and that later was found to be against the Charter of Rights.
Right.
But nonetheless, he did that. And certainly you mentioned before that with the Land Act that our Premier wanted to bring in without all the consultation and everything. Then the housing,
Yep.
imposing housing. So why are you a mayor if he's taking away all your powers?
That's a very good question that I actually ask myself sometimes, is because we spend a lot of time doing official community plans and spend a lot of money doing it. We're just finishing ours up right now. It's been a 4-year process that we have had to adjust many times because of all the legislation that's coming in, and now the province is saying, well, you need to relook at that every 5 years now, whereas it used to be 25 years, 20 years. So, we're having to put processes in place that will just keep people working in official community plans forever, because it takes 4 years to actually do one. So why are we doing an official community plan if the province can just come and say, we don't care what you say, this is what you're going to do now. So why are we spending all this time, and why are we? Why do you even need a mayor and council if you're just going to take everything on yourself? And another part of that is, if they drive something through the city or something built in the city, are they going to take liability for that now if harm is done because of that? Because cities are responsible when we allow things to go, if there's any harm done to the neighbors or whatever. So this is another question we have for the government. If you demand that we do something, are you not going to take liability for that? Because it can't be left in the city.
And with the housing density requirements that were just smacked on top of everybody, what about the infrastructure that's required to support that? Are they coming forward with lots of help from municipalities?
We haven't seen any of it yet. I know they talk about it, but it's a huge problem, and I just don't know how we are going to. Last week we just got our housing numbers that we're supposed to meet, and we'll likely meet them, but they're not being done in an organized way. When we controlled that, we made sure that housing was only allowed in areas where we had the infrastructure that could manage that. But now this can all happen all over the city. So those infrastructure challenges are real. And I think I told you this number before, that every 100 meters that we have to change the infrastructure costs the city $1 million for every street. So now we can view all these buildings anywhere in the city. We'll have to look at changing a lot of that infrastructure a lot sooner than we expected to, which we had planned for with our long-term plans. So, so it's really changed.
And also no talk about amenities that I can see from the province's point of view.
None at all. And as a matter of fact, the minister said we expect our municipalities to meet the challenges. So that was...
And I think the Prime Minister actually said recently that he thinks that development charges should be reduced.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. My question is, do you actually know how much money that is? Because...
And what it supports in the community.
And what it supports. And should, and my question is really this, should the taxpayers, the local ratepayers, backstop your immigration policies?
And on that very controversial and important point, thank you for being with us once again. And next time, maybe we'll take on immigration, huh?
That's a way out of my reach.
Back in a moment. Bill 15 provides Premier and Cabinet the power to streamline certain priority projects. First Nations are angry that this bill proceeded without their input. Municipalities are concerned that they've now lost control of their own zoning. Environmentalists feel their concerns will be ignored. But pass it did. A tie vote in the legislature that was broken by the Speaker, who voted with government. Let me know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.